Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to one of our little videos. I am absolutely thrilled and delighted today to be joined by Michael Farmer, the founder of Farmer & Company based over in the US. Hi, Michael. How are you today?
Paul, I'm great, and it's wonderful to see you again, and thank you for inviting me. I'm quite honored.
No, the honor is mine. The honor is mine. Thank you. Michael, obviously, we met many years ago at one of the Indie Summits, I think was the first time, but you've got a hugely influential readership in the US, and you know a lot about agencies. But I was wondering if, for our audience who perhaps know you less well, if you could maybe give us a little bit of the back history, because I know you've been at Bain & Company and all over, so it'd be great just to learn a little bit about you, please.
Yes, well, on paper, the CV looks like, wow, what a great plan this guy had. And of course, the reality is that almost everything that happened by accident and turned out to be good. I grew up in the Midwest, grew up in Chicago to a family of very, very modest means. I was the first kid to go to college. We didn't have any money. So I obtained a Navy scholarship. The U.S. Navy paid my way through university. I went to Princeton. They allowed me to be an English major, which is amazing. They didn't require me to be an engineer or anything like that. But I had to spend all my summers with them and then commit to 4 years of active duty. I actually spent 5 years on active duty after graduating on destroyers, and also a teaching role at Iowa State University. And then by then I was married. How old was I? I was under 30, but I was married and I had been an English major. I thought, oh my God, I don't know how to get a job. And a friend of mine said, why don't you go to business school? You learn all about business. I thought that was a pretty smart idea. So I applied and got into Harvard Business School. Had a wonderful 2 years there and really loved the case method, which was, it's a way of like reading little novellas about business problems that Mr. Squirrell has or Mr. Farmer has, and what is he supposed to do under the circumstances. And I had spent my summer between the 2 years at business school working for McKinsey just in a summer job, and I could see that consulting was a lot like business cases. So I decided to go into the consulting world, and I joined the Boston Consulting Group in Boston after I graduated. It was a small organization. It was only a couple hundred people.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Under a very brilliant leader, Bruce Henderson, who had a very different view about consulting. He said, I only want to hire young people with good degrees who can do tremendous data analysis, because that's how decisions should be made. Unlike then McKinsey, which hired, gray-haired people that had industry experience. So I joined BCG. I worked for them for 4 years. One of those years was in Brazil, doing a big study, a year's worth of there were no computers in those days, of course. It was all done with handheld calculators, which were very expensive, and a pencil and paper. So, you would do work for 6 months before you knew whether you had an answer. I reckon today you do the same work in less than a month.
Wow. Okay.
And you generate, 30 scenarios using Excel and a computer. I came back to the States from Brazil. I decided to take a little time off from consulting. I became a dean, an administrative dean at Harvard in the School of Public Health. And then after that, I joined Bain, which the founders of Bain had all been at BCG. So I had the right credentials for them. They were headed in new directions. It was 100 people. And that was, now we're talking about 1979, 1980. This is a long time ago, 40 plus years ago. I worked for Bain for a couple of years in the States, and then Bill Bain asked me if I would move to London, which I did in 82. London had 30 people, and that was it. That was our European presence. I think today Bain is about very close to 20,000 people.
Gosh, yeah, it's great.
And they have over 1,000 in London alone. But it was a quite a business. And I worked in London. I went and I ran the Munich office. I started the Paris office. I came back and ran London again. And in 1990, tired of being an administrator, I started my own firm. After a year of doing normal consulting, I was called by an advertising agency, Ogilvy, who said, "Yeah, we just been bought by Martin Sorrell. We're not making enough money. We don't really understand why." And so I started working in the advertising industry, and I was so intrigued by what I found that I decided to make that the focus of our practice. So I stayed in London until 2001, came back to the States, and have been working with ad agencies and their clients ever since. I wrote a couple books. That was never really expected. I wrote Madison Avenue Manslaughter in 2015 with further editions in 17 and 19. And that was about all the kind of disasters I saw in the way agencies and clients manage the business. Bottom line, yeah, scopes of work were growing and fees were declining.
Yeah,
and
no,
agencies,
that's where we sort of crossed
a bad
over,
scenario. But on top of it, the big agencies were all owned by holding companies that needed them to make their numbers. So workloads growing, fees declining, agencies downsizing. And then digital and social came in about 2005 to 2007, which so significantly expanded the work they were doing that agencies were really, they were really short of talent. And most of my consulting has come to the conclusion that clients are giving agencies too much work. The agencies are too readily willing to agree to it. And they do it with very junior people. And the work isn't that great. And the agencies get fired every 3 years. That's Madison Avenue Manslaughter. And I thought that's no way to run a railroad. More recently, I wrote Madison Avenue Makeover about the one agency I've worked with that has tried to avoid that trap. Huge digital and creative agency based in Brooklyn. So that's it in what, too many minutes to tell you my checkered past, But,
no, it's great. I mean, I know we met, as I say, when you were kind enough to come give a presentation at one of the indie summits a few years ago, and I was always very taken, especially by the story behind Madison Avenue Manslaughter, where the narrative that was agencies actually really don't understand where they're not making money, as it were, and the unit cost of production and all of that other good stuff, and how they really needed to grasp that. But equally, I mean, your new book, Makeover, I'm particularly taken by, because I mean, but you mentioned just before we started the interview that this was an opportunity that just sort of landed in your lap, but quite surprisingly. But what an opportunity to be able to sit inside Huge and actually be almost a fly on the wall. That must have been tremendous.
Well, it was a wonderful experience, and I was very taken by Matt Baxter, who I knew because he had been the CEO of Initiative, a big IPG media agency. And I was working in Initiative, not for Matt, but we knew each other. And then out of the blue, it was announced that after his 5-year tenure, he was going over to run Huge, a much smaller operation, but the first creative agency he had ever stepped foot in or run. He's 44 years old. He was Australian. He came to the States in around 2015 or 16 to run Initiative. Well, not right away, but that's where he ended up. And then he sent over to Huge in the middle of COVID to figure out what to do. Now, fortunately for me, he had read Madison Avenue Manslaughter. And the first thing he said to me on the phone is, "I read your book, and I am not going down that path. I'm not gonna lead a loser's game." And he said, a loser's game is where the work goes up, the fees come down, the agencies downsize for the holding company, and the quality goes down the tubes. He said, "I'm going to transform this agency not quite sure what I'm going to do, but how would you like to document what I do? And I said, I can only do that, Matt, if I have complete independence and I have total editorial control over the book. And crazily enough, he said, sure. Like, so think about a guy commissioning me to write a book where I have total independence. I can write anything I want as long as I'm not using proprietary information. And he hasn't yet figured out what he's going to do. That's Matt. You would say he's a risk taker, or you could say he's ultimately confident that he was going to end up doing the right thing, which is what I think happened. So, what did I do? I went to their first retreat in October, which was October. Now we're talking 21. He had been there for 4 months. He hadn't even met his senior people personally because he had 12 offices around the world. And, due to COVID, nobody was traveling. So that people were hands and glass the first time. And he spent 3 days leading them in a discussion of what kind of a company do we need to be. And they ended up saying, we need to be not an agency, but we need to be a what? Transformational presence in a way. We need to be in the business of helping our clients grow because we know major advertisers are not growing. If we do that and we do it successfully, we will be in a league of our own. Doesn't matter how big we are. Furthermore, we're not going to sell man hours at some guesstimate of how much work the client's going to give us. We're going to sell fixed price products. And then finally, now they didn't decide this all right away, but finally, the big thing that he did was to say, we're not going to have 12 office profit centers anymore. The offices will be experience centers where we recruit and mentor, but we're going to have a single global profit center. And so the former office heads are going to have a different role. Highly disruptive for all the employees, all of a sudden not to really have the same kind of home that they had before, but that's what he did. And I worked on the research from September 21 to July 22, and then sat down to write the book from July to November. So 4 months, 500 words a day. Gave it to my publisher in November, and by May and June we had hard copy, and so it came out at Cannes this year.
Yeah.
And it's been very well received. Madison Avenue Makeover, the transformation of Huge, and the redefinition of the ad agency business. Really fun to do. What a terrific group of people he had and pulled together in a unified way.
I think it's an amazing story, and it's a great read, and I would encourage anybody watching to get the book. And I think if I mean, we always say we're going through transformational phases in our business, but I think actually at the moment, there are a lot of pressures on a lot of people, and the business is going in very many different directions, and sometimes not good ones. The book is a fantastic story, so congratulations on pulling that together. I know we're a little short for time today, but I mean, I just wanted to ask you as a sort of cheeky question before we finish, if I can, Michael. I mean, what's your sort of view at the moment, your global view on the agency environment, the agency world? Are we in a better place than we were when you wrote the book, or do you think or not?
Let's think about the key message of Madison Avenue Manslaughter. Let's say the latest edition, 2019, it was still a critique of the industry in that I couldn't understand why not a single agency that I've worked with in 30 years documents or measures the amount of work it's going to do for the fee it gets paid. And, it was saying, why don't you think of yourself as a production facility that creates and sells ads to your, and therefore the amount you get paid should be based on the amount of work. That isn't the case. And so agencies have accepted the principle they get paid for a defined number of man hours for an uncertain amount of work, whether or not that work has any relevance to brand growth or not. That's the state of the industry, and that hasn't changed. Matt is the first CEO I've worked with in 30 years that said, we're not going to do that. We're going to sell our work at fixed prices. Now, the book was completed, like, as I said, the end of last year, before there was all this talk about AI. Think about what artificial intelligence can do. It replaces man hours. An agency business model and the holding company business model is based on man hours. I reckon that up to between 20 and 30% of agency man hours are vulnerable to AI, whether clients use it or the agencies use it. Well, how do you think a holding company is going to do if they lose 20 to 30% of their income? It's a disaster. It is an absolute tsunami that is coming. And I've talked to a number of the holding companies some of whom who have said to me, AI is great. It's just like digital and social. It's another opportunity for us to increase the number of things that we can do for our clients. There are many of them who see this as a revenue opportunity rather than a revenue destroyer. Mm-hmm. And if they are as neglectful of the AI attack as they are about the man-hour problem and their scopes of work, then we're not going to have, the holding companies are going to get broken up between now and the next 3 to 5 years. It's inevitable. Back in the 70s, there were industrial holding companies, before many people were born who participate in this industry. Not a single one of them is left. They got broken up when they couldn't deliver growth and profitability. Now, you've seen already the WPP's recent performance, which came out today, was very poor. IPG's was much less than desired. Publicis seems to motor on, but it doesn't really do things differently than the others. They've just won more business. Yeah. So I think all of the major holding companies are quite vulnerable. I hate to sound like a Debbie Downer, for the industry, but all I'm doing is telling them what the facts are. It's not that I'm making a judgment, just, an intuitive judgment. I've taken my BCG and my Bain consulting experience. I've applied it to this industry. I've gathered data. I measure scopes of work. I measure prices. I've watched the decline in agency remuneration relative to workload over 30 years, and it's in my first book. So I'm very worried, and I don't understand why management is as passive as it is.
Yeah, no, it's I agree with a lot of the stuff you say there, Michael. I mean, it's a very worrying time for a lot of us, and I think AI is thrown about, and I think there are definite benefits to it, but across all walks of life. But we don't understand fully what the implications are of that. And
it's going to affect the legal trade. It's every industry that has eager young people that are slightly overpaid for what they do, and they work 80-hour weeks, say goodbye to that. And what's going to happen is that the bottom part of the employment pyramid is going to be taken out by the software, which will get better and better and better at doing what it's doing. And it will leave those suppliers with whatever they have in senior talent to do high-level strategic and analytical work. Well, unfortunately, agencies have downsized those people over the last 30 years in order to make holding company earnings. And that's what I would be worried about, that the holding companies who've already taken out their top layer for the most part and may see their bottom layer disappear to a very great extent, aren't going to have anything left to offer their clients. And the people that'll step in will be the Bains, the McKinseys, the BCGs, the Accentures, the Deloittes, the A.T. Kearneys, PwC, and all the other people that are testing the water. And they're all quite active in this space. And they have the senior people. and it won't bother them in the least to see, the busy work done by the junior people disappear.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're starting to see that already, in my experience, to a certain degree. Michael, I know you have another appointment and you have to dash. We could talk all day, and it's always an absolute pleasure to talk with you.
Well, I would talk with you all day, any day of the week. Today isn't the most perfect day for that, but we'll do it another time.
No, I'd love to catch up. And if anyone wants to get the book or books, they are available on Amazon, and we'll put a little slide up at the end there so they can they
Absolutely.
can
Amazon has been a great seller of the books. They help to promote it. They've got the stock available. They often deliver the next day in the UK, in France, in Germany, Spain, Italy, and of course in the US, in Latin America, elsewhere. So the book is available. It's a pretty quick read, I'm told. By those, but it wasn't that quick to write, but it's a quick read. So I hope people enjoy it, and I hope they'll feel free to communicate to me about what they think about the book and what about Matt Baxter's transformation. He's an amazing guy, an amazing leader. He's got an extremely bright career ahead of him, given the boldness that he has already shown in all of the places that he has led over the last 20 years.
Indeed, and I've read the book, and I thoroughly recommend it to my colleagues to have a read, because it is a really fascinating story, and certainly gave me some ideas. But Michael, again, I know you've got to go, but thank you so much for your time, and let's catch up again soon. It's great to see you.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and it's so great to see you again.